Hello, Internet. My name is Ryan Ingram, and today we're going to be talking about how to use EIDL funds. And this video, I'm only making it because in the other video I made about me and my experience in receiving the SBA fund, I got a lot of questions about how you can use these funds. So I'm making this video because people have requested it. However, I would like to state the obvious that I'm not an attorney. I am not a CPA. Each of your situations are unique and I have no knowledge of it. So please, before you make any decisions, sit down with your professional, sit down with your CPA, your attorney, and go over your exact situation because I am not capable to determine that for you. So the basic do's and don'ts as of 5/21. I want to say this because this is an ever-evolving, ever-changing program. What's true today might not be true tomorrow, but you already know that because you've already watched a few videos on this. So the basic do's and don'ts of this SBA money. So from my understanding, you're only supposed to use these funds for working capital. Now, expenses that fall under this category are things like rent, if you have any sort of software. At my insurance agency, I have an agency management system that I pay for monthly that keeps all of my clients' data. That's something that I'm going to be using these funds to pay for. I have this office space. I'm using the funds to pay rent. I also have several other things that I need in order to stay in business. Things like email, internet, and phones. These are things that fall under the working capital because whether COVID happened or they didn't, I have to pay these things in order to stay in business. These are things that I absolutely have to have. Another thing that I pay monthly that I have to have in order to be protected is insurance. I have a lot of insurance. I have professional liability insurance. I have insurance on the office. I have insurance on my things in the office. I have insurance on my computers. I have insurance on the information on my computers. Tons of insurance. All falls under working capital. So these are the things that whether or not this pandemic happened, I have to pay these things in order to stay in business. So now that I'm not bringing in new business because everywhere has been closed, then I'm using the EIDL fund in order to pay for these things on a monthly basis. Now, what you are not to use these funds for are things like loans. So you should not use this money to pay off a higher interest loan that you have. This is not to refinance any existing loans, pay off any existing loans, or in any way restructure those loans. Okay, now my guess is the loans that you have that were already in place as the pandemic happened, that's money that you've already spent on anything, even if it was working capital, but prior to the time period that the pandemic occurred. Okay, you're also not supposed to use this money for any sort of owner pay, and that can be in the form of owner distributions, bonuses, dividends. Again, refer back to the working capital and all of the things that you have to pay on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, regardless of whether the pandemic happened or not, excluding yourself and existing loans. Okay, another way that you shouldn't use these funds are to expand. If you're looking to get your business into another territory, you're not necessarily supposed to use these funds as a means to grow your business. You're supposed to use these funds as a means to sustain your business during this pandemic. So it's not to use to your advantage. Okay, another way that you shouldn't use these funds is for the acquisition of fixed assets. So you shouldn't use this money to buy real estate. And if you look at the other videos on my channel, that is what I am all about. So naturally, when I first heard of this loan, I went through the math, long-term, 3%, man, I could use that as down payment money and really benefit. But again, that's not what this loan is for. This loan is specifically for maintaining your business during this pandemic, anything that is working capital. Okay, so lastly, payroll is a subject that I wanted to touch on very briefly. And again, this is something that you should most certainly seek the advice of a CPA or attorney on. But from my understanding, if payroll is part of your working capital to stay afloat, it's fine to use the idle money for that if you didn't also have the PPP loan. If you have the PPP loan, then you shouldn't use the PPP loan to pay payroll and also the idle to pay payroll. I'm really impressed at the number of P's in that sentence that I just spoke. When I spoke with both my CPA and my bookkeeper and we touched on the subject, they both independently used the word double dip. You're not supposed to use these different funds for the same thing. So if you're using idle money for it, do not use PPP funds for it. If you're using PPP funds, don't use idle funds for that. Most importantly, regardless of what you do use this money for or don't use this money for, what you need to do is collect all of your receipts, make sure you keep impeccable records of all of this, and above all else, make sure that any expense that you use these funds for, you can tie directly to your business being impacted inside of this pandemic. You do not want any question, especially if you are going to be audited. You don't want there to be any gray areas about, is this necessary for your business surviving the pandemic? If the answer is yes, then you're probably safe to use funds for that. If the answer is no, not really, or any sort of like wink wink situation, you probably want to play on the safe side and don't use those funds for that. So, like several people have pointed out in the comments of the other video, taking these funds is optional. You don't have to take these funds, but misusing these funds can most certainly get you imprisoned or heavily fined. So if you've taken these funds, please be careful, please be smart, and double and triple check all of the things that you plan on using the funds for, because the last thing I want to see is for you to be in prison, because you can't watch my videos from prison, and that would make me sad. How selfish is that? Or funny? I thought it was really funny. So thanks so much for liking, for commenting, and even subscribing. I appreciate you guys asking for this video. And if there's any other points of clarification, while this is not my job, while I am not the professional that you need to be seeking advice from, I'm more than happy to help or talk to people in my network to find those answers for you. So thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon.